from Amy Harvey, yeah. So make sure you have that squirreled away somewhere, so you have that. And then you also have an invitation from Amy for the 2:15 on Friday as a panelist.
How long do we think that's gonna last? Do we have a sense?
We're gauging at least a couple of hours, but it depends on how many questions we all ask and that kind of thing. Before, I think it's taken us 2 to 3, depending.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take a minimum of 2 hours probably just to do the debrief. Yeah. And a minimum. And then we are going to be discussing, hopefully, and come to a conclusion as to who are the finalists we want to interview.
So midnight?
No, we're good. We're good. There's only 5 candidates.
Wait. What was the 2:15 thing?
2:15 on Friday is when we are reviewing the assessment center information on our attorney search. Oh, we're getting ready to go live.
1 minute.
Okay.
30 seconds.
Ooh, thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 17th Town of Chapel Hill special meeting. We're glad to have those of you who are here with us joined on virtually during this interesting time in our lives, and those who are watching streaming and those who will watch later. All of our meetings are recorded and are put out there for you to review at a later time if you so choose. We have many things on the agenda tonight, but the agenda has shifted a little bit. Just to give you an update, item number 9, which was the rezoning of 125 East Rosemary, has been postponed. And item number 10 has been pulled from the agenda concerning the Elliott Road extension project. We'll get more information back to you on that one, but those 2 items have been removed from tonight's agenda. We do have a closed session after this evening's meeting. I'll remind you about that again. We have 2 updates tonight, one on the town's response to the COVID-19 crisis and one on the process to align town ordinances for development review with the new state laws. We have 2 public hearings tonight, except for the one has been postponed, so sorry, so just one. And we have approval on a couple of items, the affordable housing and revisions to the North-South Bus Rapid Transit. So please note the revised agenda, and I'm sorry for anyone who didn't get a heads up and wanted to speak. We'll always take comments, written comments. If you had comments on those items that have been postponed, we're happy to still get those in writing from you, and we'll let you know when they're coming back. So in keeping with the new rules on virtual meetings, I need to do a roll call. I will call your name and you will unmute yourself and say present, please, or here. Mayor Pro Tem Michael Parker.
Here.
Councilmember Jess Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Alan Boyncy.
Here.
Councilmember Hongbin Gu.
Present.
Councilmember Tai Nguyen.
Here.
Councilmember Amy Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Stegman.
Here.
Great, thank you. All right, tonight we have a special proclamation, and I'm asking Councilmember Mr. Boyncy to make an important announcement about this proclamation that our council is making this week. So, Mr. Boyncy.
So, we are, as a council and as a town, proclaiming June 19, 2020 as Juneteenth. On Friday, June 19th, the town of Chapel Hill will join Carrboro, Durham, Cary, and other neighboring communities in honoring Juneteenth, the day in 1865 when enslaved African Americans in Galveston, Texas, were among the last to receive the word about their freedom, granted by the Emancipation Proclamation. That news came about 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, making slavery illegal in the Confederate States. 1 year later, in 1866, freed people in Texas began celebrating the anniversary of Juneteenth. And over the past 153 years, Juneteenth has been one of the nation's oldest celebrations of the end of slavery in the United States. Juneteenth is a time to reflect and take stock of the progress made since the abolition of slavery and the progress that has been unmade and not made. This year, the town of Chapel Hill wishes to officially recognize this important event. In so doing, we urge all residents and employers to recognize the holiday and take the day to reflect and take action to advance freedom and equality. We also encourage all to tune into the Town of Carborough's website on Friday, June 19th, this Friday, June 19th, for a video program commemorating the holiday, the reading of a resolution by African-American elected officials of Orange County, and a presentation by Dr. Freddie Parker, a professor of history at North Carolina Central University. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boincy, for bringing this forward. And we know that the fight for racial justice and equity have been a long one, and that it's important for all of us to use these milestones like Juneteenth as a time to reflect on how we can continue to move forward together. During this time, finding ways to connect and listen to one another are really, really important. And in this virtual world, it's even more important. I hope everyone will take time on Friday to join the program that Carborough and the African-American leaders in our area have worked so hard on. And I'm hopeful that next year we can plan something together to really celebrate and commemorate this special occasion. All right, a couple of announcements. Last week, we heard from a lot of our community. We've been hearing many comments. We like hearing from our community. We're trying to figure out a way to work together to move forward. And it's our intention to have that community conversation on racial bias and policing with some process, town hall meetings, all those kinds of things. And both the manager and I have been reaching out with members of the council and with other local leaders. And we're hoping to finalize a date. We think we have something in the works to start soon. There's also been a lot of conversations on how to move forward with a process for evaluating our budget, our policies and programs to ensure that we're allowing and allocating our resources in ways that support the safety, well-being, and equitable treatment of our entire community. The first step, though, is for us to work together as a council to craft this process for engaging the public, for identifying solutions and implementing the changes that we want to see. Because time is critical and because people are impassioned, I've asked our manager to make time for all of you on our next Monday meetings to have some check-ins to see how we're going to move forward with this, to get some feedback and plan on our next steps so that we can be ready by our next Wednesday council meeting with some kind of budget discussion. If you're able to participate in those check-ins or want to speak with me directly or the manager, please reach out and we'll work on that. But I want to make sure we've heard from everyone on council, and I want to make sure we're including community voices as well. That this needs to be a community-wide effort. That's how we do things in our community. We want to be inclusive. We want to make sure that we're working together. Time is of the essence, though, and we know that next week is our last meeting before we break for the summer. We don't want that to slow our progress on these important issues, though. So we will get back with you with more information, and I encourage you to reach out. Still trying to put all this together. Advisory board meetings, we've got several of them going on. The meeting agendas and the times can be found on our town webpage. The public is always welcome to attend, especially remotely. Advisory board meetings are open to the public, and public comment can always be provided by email or signing up to speak remotely, so you can do that. And a friendly reminder, we are having a closed session. We know that we have a few speakers signed up this evening, and a friendly reminder, we know it's a little bit of a difficult process to bring you in to be on a panelist, but we'll work with you on that. Mr. Parker will be helping call people and run the timer for the 3 minutes. But we do want to hear from you, so we'll be working forward with you on that. So are there any other announcements before we go on to the update, the COVID-19 update? Okay. Then let's go ahead, and I guess we had on here the consent agenda. Sorry, we have that on there first. We only have one item on the
consent agenda.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Wynn for the consent agenda. And I will have to take a roll call vote. So if you are in favor, please say aye. Mayor Pro Tem Michael Parker,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Boyancy,
Aye.
Councilmember Gu,
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen,
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan,
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman,
Aye.
and Mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. Consent agenda is approved and you have your information. So then we go on to Ms. Drayton on updates on the town efforts to respond to the COVID-19. And she's sharing her screen now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you and good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kelly Drayton. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator for the town of Chapel Hill. This presentation will provide some key updates from the town's COVID-19 response over the last 7 days. And we'll provide an update on our face covering mandate that went into effect last week. So starting off with some of our key updates from our Emergency Operations Center. It's been a busy week. Last week, North Carolina officials released further details regarding plans for reopening public schools this fall. The North Carolina Department of Public Instruction outlined 3 options that could be used depending on the level of physical distancing that's required. The school system has reached out to engage town staff and other key community partners to work on the various operational committees to plan for these reopening scenarios. Yesterday, North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services announced a one-time allocation of $35 million in federal funding that will go to our local health departments. Funds will support COVID-19 staffing, infection control, testing and tracing, and IT infrastructure and data sharing. Also last week, OWASA announced that its approved budget for fiscal year 2021 would not include any rate increase. OWASA also announced that they are extending their temporary suspension of disconnection for lack of payment until July 29th, and they continue to work with families to establish a no late fee repayment plan. Just a quick reminder about OWASA's Care to Share initiative, which is their customer assistance program aimed at ensuring everyone within our community has access to clean water. If you're interested in donating to this program, you can visit OWASA's website at owasa.org. Donations can be made, added to your monthly bill or made directly at the website. On Monday, our Chapel Hill Public Library expanded their curbside pickup service. This contact-free service allows you to check out library materials while the library is still closed for COVID-19. To select the materials, you just search the library catalog and place them on hold. And then when the items are ready, you'll receive an email from the library explaining how to pick them up. On any given day in the pre-COVID environment, there were usually between 550 and 800 items on the hold shelf in the library. On Monday, when this program was rolled out, they had requests for approximately 2,500 new items that were on the hold shelf.
Wow.
So I think it's safe to say they're getting a very warm reception from our community on this. Another one of the incredible services that we continue to offer is our food bank. And I did want to note that beginning July 1st, the town's weekly food distribution will move from the Chapel Hill Library to Eubanks Road Park and Ride Lot. All Wednesday distributions will be held from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And this food distribution is available to all Orange County residents in need. And today, our food distribution efforts served 401 households and over 1,600 individuals. And finally, you'll soon see our Spread Kindness, Not Illness campaign on our Chapel Hill transit system. The campaign gets to the simplicity of our message, encouraging everyone to care for each other, even if that's just by wearing a mask and smiling with your eyes. Chapel Hill and everyone in Orange County has been under a face covering mandate since 5 p.m. on Friday, and we're excited to see neighboring counties and communities consider similar regulations. Call volumes have dropped in our call center in recent weeks, and we've actually only received 1 call about the face covering mandate. In fact, our overall call numbers to the call center have dropped significantly enough that we were able to reduce our staff in the call center while continuing to provide the same incredible customer service. During this initial phase, we are asking for voluntary compliance and patience as we work to educate everyone in our community about this new mandate and the importance of wearing a face covering. I'd like to remind everyone about the campaign about 7 years ago to promote a smoke-free Orange County. Similarly, that campaign was about promoting health by prohibiting smoking in public places. And while enforcement was ultimately an option, the goal was to educate and advocate for a safe community for everyone. To support this new mandate and ensure that everyone in our community has access to these resources, we have begun offering community mass distribution sites. So starting this week and going forwards, on Wednesdays and Saturdays from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., we will be distributing face coverings from Fire Stations 1 and Fire Stations 3. We'll also be accepting donations of face coverings, both disposable and cloth, during those dates and times at the fire stations, as well as daily at the Hargraves Community Center. And today alone, we received over 600 donated face coverings. So a huge thank you to our community for that. As we look to reopen responsibly, just a reminder that science continues to reinforce that wearing a face covering is one of the most effective ways to slow the spread of COVID-19. And remembering the 3 W's, this is a critical component of our campaign for public health. This includes wearing a face covering, washing your hands frequently, and waiting 6 feet apart. And with that, we would be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Kelly. I just wanted to update council too. You asked me to check in with the MAC group to find out what the inflection point would be for us to make a decision to change what we're doing and either lock down more or make those directions. And we talked about that being hospitalization numbers going up, which unfortunately usually lags about 3 weeks behind a rise in overall cases going up. So we are tracking those numbers specifically in our community, but also around our community. We are seeing an uptick across North Carolina, as you know. There are some concerns. The governor is planned to speak again tomorrow. We don't usually get a heads up more than about 45 minutes beforehand about what he's going to be speaking on, but our guess is that the numbers trending up are going to signal some different kinds of actions. We're hopeful anyway that stronger actions, and you're starting to see other communities around us start mandating the face coverings as well. We also met with UNC group talking about how we're communicating, how we're partnering, working together about UNC coming back into our community. There is a lot of different dialogues going on, a lot of different scenarios. It's not all like the 60 Minutes things. There's just a lot more detail and a lot more information, but we have to work through this. And we're starting to hear from our community who have concerns about how this is going to be implemented. And we are working on it. We're not waiting. The clock ticking is 7 weeks before move-in date starts back. So we know that that's out there. We are doing our best. UNC is requiring face coverings on campus and making strides to help mesh the two. When they do their webinars for incoming students, they talk about wearing that Chapel Hill and Orange County are mandating face coverings. They're talking about all that. When everyone's password, their onion as it's called, is reset, they have to fill out all the forms saying they acknowledge they understand all the new rules about being safe in our community. So they are trying to take some steps to make sure that they're educating everyone about the university's policies, about our policies, and about, just as Ms. Drayton said, be kind and protect other people. So those conversations are underway both at staff level, at policy level, but at the end of the day, we are partners and we have to work together. So I just wanted to share that with you. Are there questions for Ms. Drayton? Okay. Is anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item? Ms. Harvey, do you have anybody?
I do not have
Okay.
anybody registered.
Okay, then thank you for that. And please join on your Monday update call with us. And thank you for all that. And great job on the food coordination. And we're continuing to want to serve and make sure that we have the resources people need to help them get through this very difficult time. Item number 5, approve the Affordable Housing Bond and Affordable Housing Development Reserve Funding Plan. Mr. Roman Folks.
Good evening, and Lauren's going to kick us off.
Thanks, Nate. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Lauren Clark, and I'm your Executive Director for Housing and Community. And the purpose of tonight's presentation is to share the staff's recommendation for use of $5.25 million in affordable housing bond and affordable housing development reserve funding. In response to the Council's affordable housing goals, in 2017, we created an affordable housing investment plan, the cornerstone of which is an affordable housing bond. And this has been a priority project for our team's work plan over the past few years. The decision before you tonight is to consider approval of a $5.25 million funding plan for the affordable housing development projects of the town, as well as with our outside agency partners. I'll start by providing a background on how we've implemented the Council's affordable housing investment plan. And then Nate will share with you an overview of the projects that we've received applications for and the staff's recommended funding plan. So over the past several years, the town has increased its support for affordable housing and established an investment plan to get more units on the ground and also to preserve what's existing on the ground. In fiscal year 15, the council established the Affordable Housing Development Reserve, an annual allocation of about $688,000 of local funds to support affordable housing development in the community. The council's increased support has increased our impact in the community and also allowed the town, in collaboration with our partners, to begin addressing the need for creating more units. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a significant increase in the number of units that have come online as a result of the additional funding that's been available to the community. So as the council considers to explore ways to increase our impact and support creation of more affordable housing units, in 2018, we pursued a $10 million affordable housing bond, which was overwhelmingly approved by Chapel Hill voters. Through the investments the town has made in affordable housing, including the recent $10 million bond, we anticipate that the town will support the development of 400 units and the preservation of 300 units of affordable housing over the next several years. So there's good news in that we are pleased to share that we're making progress toward meeting our targets. So through the third quarter of this year, we've supported the development of 190 units and the preservation of 229 units of affordable housing in Chapel Hill. So now I'll turn the presentation over to Nate, and he'll talk about the proposed funding plan for this first cycle of affordable housing bond funds.
Thank you, Lauren. And good evening, Mayor and Council. The bond's first funding round followed the process discussed at Council's March 4th meeting, which included $5 million of bond funds and $250,000 remaining in this year's Affordable Housing Development Reserve allocation. And so in mid-March, we launched our standard request for a proposal process for outside agency funding requests, making $1.75 million available to outside agencies. Following our standard process, the Housing Advisory Board reviewed these requests and created a recommendation for use of those funds. The remaining $3.5 million was set aside for town-initiated projects. On this slide, you'll find the funding requests that are under consideration tonight. We received 4 funding requests from outside agencies. The first 4 rows showed those requests, and the last row is the $3.5 million for town-initiated projects. As you can see in the first 4 rows, there was $2.3 million requested for outside agencies, resulting in a gap of $600,000 between what was requested and the funds available to allocate. On this slide, you can see the recommended funding plan. I'll quickly provide an overview of this plan before providing additional information on each project, the request, and the recommendation on the next slides. The recommendation includes fully funding the CASA and Pee Wee Homes projects, partially funding the Habitat project, and not providing additional funding for the Empowerment project at this time. It also provides funding the full $3.5 million for the town-initiated project at 2200 Homestead Road, with the anticipation of requesting funding for the town's Trinity Court redevelopment in the next funding cycle, which is place within the next couple of years. And I'll provide more information on that later in the presentation. So this plan allocates all available funds and would support the development of 270 new affordable housing units. I'll now provide more information on the projects and context behind the recommendation. I'll first start with the Empowerment Johnson Street project in the Pine Knolls neighborhood. This is planned to be a small multifamily development of 8 units, serving households from 0 income to about $54,000 for a family of 4. They requested $350,000 in this funding cycle. Council did allocate a little over $100,000 for this project in January of this year for land acquisition. And there is an additional parcel of land which is currently owned by the town that Empowerment is planning to develop as part of this project. The Housing Advisory Board recommended holding off on providing additional funding for the project at this time until Empowerment gains site control of all parcels planned to be developed. And the recommended funding plan presented tonight is in line with that recommendation. We did receive a request to convey the parcel of town-owned land to Empowerment this week, and we can plan to have an agenda item ready in early fall for council to consider that request. And that could be in time for the Housing Advisory Board and Council's review of Affordable Housing Development Reserve applications in the fall. And the project is currently anticipated to begin construction in the early part of 2022. The second request for funding is Habitat for Humanity's Weaver's Grove project. The request is for $1.5 million to support the development of 100 affordable units that would be incorporated within a mixed income development that would include market rate homes. The 100 affordable units will serve families from around $27,000 to, with household incomes around $27,000 to $72,000 for a family of 4. And the recommendation tonight, in line with the HAB's recommendation, is to fund a little over $1.25 million of the $1.5 million requested. The Weaver's Grove project has gone through much of the development review process already and is scheduled to be heard for council consideration next week. And as a reminder, any funding approval by council tonight is and would be a separate consideration from approval of the project itself. So if the conditional zoning application is not approved, funding would not be dispersed for the project. If zoning approvals are in place in the near future, Habitat plans to begin construction in the early part of 2021. The next 3 projects include recommendations to fully fund the request. This CASA project is for 48 rental homes in Pine Knolls and on the border of Chapel Hill and Carborough, and would serve families from 0 income up to about $54,000 for a family of 4. 24 of the 48 units will be in Chapel Hill and 24 will be in Carborough. CASA has completed the development review process and has the zoning in place needed to begin construction in early 2021. The last outside agency request is for a tiny home duplex on Mitchell Lane in Northside by Pee Wee Homes. This request is for $55,000. These 2 homes would serve seniors at the lowest incomes and who have a history of homelessness. There's no rezoning needed for the project, and they anticipate beginning construction later in the summer. The last project is the town-initiated project at 2200 Homestead Road that is planned to provide about 120 affordable rental and homeownership homes serving households from 0 income up to about $105,000 for a family of 4. This project is anticipated to be developed with developer partners Self-Help, CASA, Community Home Trust, and Habitat for Humanity. The project is expected to submit a development application in the fall and it could start construction in early 2022. One other town project to highlight is the town's public housing redevelopment project at Trinity Court, which Town Council recently provided direction on for next steps. Funding for that project is anticipated to be included in the next bond funding cycle, which we plan will take place within the next couple of years. This allows time for staff to begin taking next steps on that project based on council direction and based on current project timeline alignment with other funding cycles, such as low-income housing tax credits. So this table, again, you can see the recommended funding plan. Some highlights of this plan is that it would support the development of 270 new affordable housing units. It would leverage about $46 million from outside sources and would provide affordable housing, long-term affordable housing located near transit stops. And Lauren mentioned or showed where we are in our progress towards reaching our goals. If the funding plan is approved, we do anticipate reaching the development target of 400 units through use of bond funds. And as a reminder, we are asking council to consider approving the recommended affordable housing funding plan that's in resolution R4.
Thank you. Are there clarifying questions from council at this time? We do have members of the public wishing to speak, but we will hear clarifying questions. Mr. Parker?
Just one, I think, easy one and one a little bit more complicated. So the easy one is, when are funds dispersed? Are they dispersed as they're expended by the housing providers? Do we give it to them when the project is approved? How do we deal with the disbursement of funds?
Typically, we disperse funds on a reimbursement basis. So the agency incurs the expense, and then we provide a reimbursement once they show us the necessary documentation that is needed to process the check or process the reimbursement.
And then the second question relates to the CASA project, and the project itself. We've approved it, and I think it's a terrific project. But if I'm not mistaken, our total commitment to that project, given what we've already committed to them, will be somewhere north of $950,000. And Carborough, which gets half of the unit, I mean, at least physically, the units are half in Carborough, half in Chapel Hill. Carborough is only contributing $350,000 to the project. So can you talk a little bit about why you felt that was an equitable distribution of commitment to the project?
So looking at CASA's application, they did score the highest of all the applications that the Housing Advisory Board reviewed through their scoring rubric. And it is very competitive with the typical subsidy per unit that the town gives for projects, and is in line with a typical cost per unit.
Well, Nate, if I can interrupt, it's competitive on a subsidy per unit basis on the basis of 48 units, but only if you count that we're only getting 24 units in Chapel Hill, I'm not sure that the subsidy per unit is competitive.
And the question was asked at the Housing Advisory Board meeting whether Housing Advisory Board members had any concern over 24 of the projects being over the town line in Carborough. They didn't express any concern with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Nguyen?
So I have some interest in considering shifting some of the funds from the Homestead project to empowerment. Could you tell me how that might impact the Homestead project?
Sure. Well, part of it would depend on how much would be shifted, of course, but it depends on how much is shifted partially. But if we're not talking about significant amount of money, in comparison to what is being recommended for funding, we could look at other funding sources. There obviously would be a gap in funding needed, so we would need to locate other funding sources, and would likely apply again to the town through the development reserve to help bridge that gap.
Okay, Ms. Gu?
Follow up with the question the council member Parker just mentioned for CASA. So we understand that there are 48 units. and the 24 is on the side of Chapel Hill and 24 is on the side of Carborough. But is there, like, when people are applying for those units, does it mean that only 24 units are available for the people living in Chapel Hill, or is that altogether 48 is a pool that anyone can apply? Can you just describe how those 48 units are going to be distributed, or what kind of requirement or residence requirement is going to be needed to apply for those units?
Yeah, and I might ask, we have, I think, CASA participating on the line that could talk in more detail about what their intake and application review process, or how they actually fill those units, if that would be helpful.
I think just a friendly reminder that the fair housing laws require that you don't have to be a resident here. You can apply from anywhere. I know CASA has their own income restrictions, and I'm happy for them to share. And I know that Mary Jean Cita has signed up to speak, but you don't have to. Fair housing laws require that the applications are open to anyone, regardless of where your current residency is.
Yeah, so that's my understanding as well. I think that even though physically half of the units are located in Chapel Hill, half is in Carborough, that doesn't mean that the Chapel Hill resident can only occupy the half of the units. So, but with that, I just want to clarify that. Another question is for the empowerment. You mentioned that the town council has committed 100,000 for the land acquisition for empowerment. And is it right that you're saying at this time they have not acquired the land yet? Can you tell us,
So there's 2 parcels of land that Empowerment plans on using for the development of this project. One parcel is land that they did acquire, and that was through using the town funds. There is the second parcel of land, which is currently owned by the town, which they would need to, and have this week asked officially for the town to consider conveying that parcel of land to them for this project. And that would be a town council decision on whether to do that.
So if the land acquisition is completed, will they still be eligible to apply for additional funding to support the project? Or is it the case that if this allocation is done, then they do not have other additional sources available to them?
We do, they would be eligible to apply for additional funding. We do have our annual allocation from into the Affordable Housing Development Reserve. And we anticipate the next funding cycle for that being in early fall, and should have over $500,000 or so available for that funding round to be considered for projects.
Okay, Ms. Stegman?
I want to go back to Councilmember Nguyen's question about empowerment. Correct me if I'm not remembering this right, but I believe in the materials that said that empowerment was told they could apply for funding again in the, I guess it's the next round of the Affordable Housing Development Reserve, instead of getting funding this round. Is that right?
That was the HAB recommendation, yep.
Okay, so if we were to take, say, $150,000 maybe from the Homestead bucket and go ahead and give that funding to empowerment now so they can keep moving forward with their planning, could the town apply then instead to just kind of flip those 2 scenarios?
The town could apply for funding and would likely need to if 150,000 were or not the full 3.5 million were allocated towards it this round.
But given the amount that would still be provided for Homestead, would is that enough to keep moving forward with the homestead plans as well?
We would keep moving forward with the homestead plans.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
My first question, I think, was a follow-up to one of Michael's questions, which I think I understood to be if there's 24 units in Carborough and 24 units in Chapel Hill for CASA project, but it sounds like, I think his question was, why are the two towns not contributing the same amount of money? Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask that question to get an understanding of why the towns are contributing different amounts of money.
So I don't know what Carborough's considerations have been or requests that they've received. So it's hard for me to speak on what's happened in Carborough. I can speak on their application here in Chapel Hill, and perhaps that's a question for CASA if they have additional information on why they requested the amounts that they have.
Gotcha. So it's not like it was coordinated or that the towns were communicating at all about how this was going to be divided up, or there wasn't some agreement that Carborough would do something and Chapel Hill would do something. It's just CASA went to the two boards and asked for money, and the boards decided. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair. And I think that there was a, it's a question of the amount of funding that's available through the town of Carborough for affordable housing development also, which I think is a bit of a difference between the two towns.
Gotcha. Okay. And then if you could just, in terms of the reallocation of 2200 Homestead, so is there any kind of negative impact of transferring that money, or is it fine to just have the town reapply in the fall versus empowerment?
I think it would be fine. I don't see there being, it wouldn't slow anything down. And I think we would submit an application, or self-help or someone from the development team would submit an application in the fall and hope to be allocated funds at that time. We are not aware right now of any additional requests for those funds in the fall. So hopefully that's there'd be a good chance for getting funding through that cycle. And just to follow up on Councilmember Stegman's comment also is that the town has applied for development reserve funds in the past for other projects. So that's not something that's unusual if we did decide to apply for funds for 2200.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Nate, Chapel Hill has a history of not charging developmental fees for affordable housing projects. Can we make sure that we reflect how much money we've contributed in not charging those fees in this project? And do we know that Carborough, they were looking to do the same? Do we know that they didn't charge the fees as well? Because that affects numbers of units when we can waive the fees for development review.
Yep, we can certainly reflect that in our numbers. I am not positive on whether Carborough has waived those fees or not.
Okay.
I don't know if Lauren knows.
Do you have a rough guess of what our fees were on the development review?
Not offhand.
Don't know, no. The self-help team may have a sense, but yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know that offhand.
Okay, right. So should we hear from our public wishing to speak on this item now at this time? Mr. Parker, do you have the list of people?
I do. The first person signed up to speak is Mary Jane Seda from CASA and also Vice Chair of the Housing Advisory Board.
Thank you.
Followed by Danita Hogan, Mason Hogans.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good. Come on in.
Am I good? I wasn't, let's see
We
here.
can hear you. Now we can't. Unmute yourself. Mary Jean, you're muted.
So,
There you go.
how's that?
Much better. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. It's the first time coming into your council meeting. So I signed up both because I'm representing the HAP tonight. So if you had questions for the HAP,
Okay.
and I'm also disclosing that I'm the CEO of CASA, so I can also answer questions for CASA.
Thank
So
you.
I'll answer, I was taking notes, so I'll answer some of the questions that came from council persons. In regards to the applying to Carborough and applying to the town of Chapel Hill for funding, a lot of that really has to do with the resources available. So Carborough had a very limited amount of money for affordable housing. And I believe when we went to them a year or two ago for funding, we may have depleted their affordable housing funds. They, unlike Chapel Hill, do not have a reserve that they keep filling every year. And we applied to the town of Chapel Hill because of the bond funding that was available. So that was about the funding. And in regards to the 24, the way the land is, and 24 units are on Chapel Hill and 24 units in the town of Carborough. Yes, it's true that for us, that's a pool of 48 apartments available to people. We also have Orange County bond funding in the project. So we also don't ask for a residency requirement. We're really looking at our persons meeting the income eligibility requirement. And we partner with all of our local agencies in Chapel Hill, Carborough, Orange County. I mean, that's how we'll attempt to be able to, because we want to serve the persons who live here. And I'd say that there are persons who work in the town of Chapel Hill and Carborough, but can't afford to live here, right? So they're living outside, but want to live closer to their employment, or whether it's schools they want their children to attend. So some people may move in that are outside of Orange County or Chapel Hill and Carborough because this is their employment center. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Did I answer all the questions?
Do you happen to know if Carborough charges for affordable housing?
Oh, I wrote that down and I'll have to go back and look.
Okay, we're just curious.
I can let you know.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions of Mary Jean as far as CASA or representing the HAB tonight? Ms. Gu?
Yeah, well, I do have one question. I understand you said that the eligibility is mainly based on the income, but do you have any data? I mean, based on the CAFA projects that has been implemented or completed in Chapel Hill, how many of our residents are either like who used to be the residents of Chapel Hill, who does not have housing available to them before this project, and now they're able to living in this CASA affordable housing projects, and also how many residents you have that are related to Chapel Hill, let's say working at the UNC hospital, but they have to be traveling from outside to Chapel Hill. Now they have the possibility to live close by. Do you have any data to support that? I think that is important for the council to understand those data so that we can make a case to our community that we really are helping to resolve the crisis that we are seeing, affordable housing crisis that we are seeing in Chapel Hill.
Mm-hmm. We have an applicant pool with persons who have applied for housing. I believe that for Orange County, there may be like 300 people in that applicant pool. We initially ask for just very basic information, and I can go back to our staff and let you know. People may tell us what their income is, their family size. I'm not sure if we ask where they are employed, like physically where they're employed. So I can go back and ask staff, because we can pull that out. It's in our software.
Yeah, if you have those data, I think it's going to be very helpful and informative for us to know that how much we are it's great that we are able to generate those new affordable housing units, but we also need to know how much a need that has been addressed in our town. So I think if we have those data, that would be very helpful.
Sure.
Ms. Anderson?
I just really wanted to quickly comment. So I totally understand that question. I think one of the benefits of, regardless of whether people are moving into these units as Chapel Hill residents or not, it's making Chapel Hill accessible to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to live here. So I understand the question that, I think we certainly often are wondering, like, are there folks in our community who are experiencing homelessness or who are housing insecure? And of course we want to help those folks, but I think part of the crisis that we're facing is also the inaccessibility to people. And so this means that people, for whatever reason, but often people who work in town, if they can't afford to live here, this is meaning that we can, people can live here who work here, but also just that we can have a more diverse, inclusive community. So people who, who make our town, what it is, can live here. But I totally understand your question. I'm not trying to say it's not a good one. I'm just trying to offer another perspective, which is that giving people access to be able to live here is also important too.
Mary Jean, can you remind us how many units CASA currently has in Chapel Hill or Orange County in general?
So in Chapel Hill, we have the 10 one-bedroom duplexes that are on Pritchard Avenue Extension. And then we have a couple of duplexes that are on Johnson Street, actually right across from where Empowerment is going to develop. And then in Carrboro, we have the Club Nova apartments. There's 24 efficiency apartments that's specifically for persons with disabilities. And then 1, 2, 5 other units that are in Carrboro.
Great. And thank you, because I've seen all your units. If you have that in written form, which I know you do, could you send that back out to council just so we all have that?
Sure.
Because it's good to be reminded. You've done some incredible work and with veterans and all kinds of different groups of folks, and we love our community partners. So if you could share that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. We'll take our next speaker.
That's Danita Mason-Hogans, followed by Dolores Bailey. And I would remind our next 2 speakers of our 3-minute limit.
Welcome, Danita. You're on mute. Maybe you'll unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, and now I've lost, okay, now I see you. For those people who don't know me, my name is Danita Mason-Hogans, and I serve on the board of Empowerment. I'm also from Chapel Hill, from 7 generations. And I wanted just to share with you that the reason that I decided to join the board of Empowerment was because after 7 generations, and with so much love for this town, I could not afford to live in the town where my ancestors came and my ancestors were from. So I really wanted to make sure that people were able to have an opportunity to live and not have to go through the experience that I went through. We're in a very different moment right now where we understand and realize the legacy of white supremacy and gentrification and the impact that it has had on our town. So I am really a firm believer that budgets reveal who we value and what we value. And the budget making process and decisions that go into budget allocations reveal who we value in town. So I am very concerned about empowerment being left out of the decision-making process and being left out of consideration when empowerment is run by Black women, a grassroots organization that is dedicated to housing for people with low wealth in our community who are predominantly Black. I think we really should consider that. I think we should understand the difference between equality and equity. And I think what we need in Chapel Hill right now is a bit of equity. And I think we need to take all of this into consideration when we do things like budget allocations and hold people to standards. I was reading the notes from the last meeting and understand that site control or lack of site control was a reason or rationale for empowerment not being considered for a budget. And I think we need to keep in mind the history of gentrification and home ownership and land ownership. There have been so many families like mine who have been locked out of the process and then being beholden to understandings and considerations from people who are not low wealth or necessarily understand what people in those communities went through. So I just wanted to share that with you and specifically talk about our project on Johnson Street, which means so much to so many people. Right now, especially, these problems have been exacerbated by COVID-19. And we have a waiting list of people that are needing our help. So I would really ask and urge that the council members take into consideration that we have a lot of work to do this summer. And I would appreciate a reevaluation of our allocation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dolores Bailey.
Welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Town Council members, Mr. Manager. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Dolores Bailey. I'm the Executive Director of Empowerment Incorporated. Empowerment is a nonprofit located in Chapel Hill that provides affordable rental throughout Orange County and affordable commercial rental space in the Midway Business Center to small businesses often faced with barriers caused by race, gender, or income. We serve an affordable rental population that no one else is serving in Chapel Hill, homeless to 80%, veterans, and voucher holders. Tonight, I am here to ask for a redistribution of the funding recommendations submitted by the HAB that would include Empowerment Incorporated. With this funding, Empowerment intends to create much needed affordable rental units in the Pine Knolls community. I've been taught how to share my screen. Let me see if I can do it. Maybe not. Amy? Hold on.
You're fine. We'll wait.
Okay. I thought I could do this, but I don't see it. Amy, could you share this slide?
Or the PDF?
Yes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Empowerment was not able to attend the HAB meeting that you've discussed a couple of times. The question of site control is one that came up during the discussion, but I do want to make the council aware that site control is not a criteria for the bond fund. And so unfortunately, since we were not there to talk about that, that should not have been an issue, but it was. The Empowerment staff has since watched the video from the HAB meeting and met with Nate and Sarah of the town staff. We understand that our scores would have allowed us access to the funding. This is good news. Our timeline to complete this much needed affordable rental has been delayed by COVID-19. We had anticipated starting the project way before now. It was necessary for Empowerment to use our construction reserve dollars that we had set aside to begin this project this summer. They were needed to assist existing residential and commercial tenants with their rental payments because of the COVID-19 situation. On the screen right now are the units that we were preparing to build on Pine Knolls. As owners of 58 affordable rental units, Empowerment understands the importance of housing stability. And we were happy that no family and no commercial business will lose their business nor lose their home stability. Empowerment is expecting this project, the one on Pine Knolls, will be completed in the 23-24 year, but only if it gets started this summer, which is why we are requesting the funds now. Amy, can you go to the next one? This is an outline of what the units will look like. They will be 4 one-bedrooms 3 2-bedrooms and 1 3-bedroom unit, answering the need of what we found to be on our waiting list for what people need, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And the next one. The document with why we want to have additional funding. I believe you all got this report also. It's a list of the reasons why empowerment would like to be included in the funding for this cycle. Here they are. Can you all see them? Letter to the council. And it outlines some of the points that we've made. Empowerment cannot afford to delay the start of this project. We have assembled a team of housing professionals in Josh Gerlitz and Roger Perry of East West Partners. We are requesting funding to hire the architectural firm and the civil engineering firm to begin our project this summer. I think the question has been asked, will we be able to move forward? We are anticipating site control. I've been talking with Ms. Clark about that. I understand that probably the earliest we'll be able to even have the land conveyed to us is in September. But through the summer months, we need to start with the architectural firm, which has already provided these drawings, and then ultimately to hire a civil engineering firm this summer so that we can begin and start for our site plans. I'd like to thank you again for your consideration of some kind of allocation to empowerment, and to let you know and assure you that that is what we will do with our dollars this summer, is to continue forward as we have started. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. Okay, do we have anyone else signed up to speak? Oh, did you have a question of Dolores, Mr. Monty?
I did not, sorry.
Okay.
Raised my hand at the wrong time.
All right, sorry. Do we have any other speakers signed up to speak on this item?
Do not.
Okay. I had promised to call on Mr. Wynn first, so we're going to do that. Then Mr. Boise next. Okay. All right.
Gotcha. So I just wanted to I guess, I don't know how to do this, make the proposal, given that the town could come back in the fall and we don't anticipate any other applications for the Affordable Housing Development Reserve funds, and moving the 150 to 200,000, like Ms. Clark was saying, won't slow down that project. I'd like to propose moving that amount of money over from the Homestead project to empowerment. I strongly believe that, you know, as a town, all these affordable housing providers are doing great work in our community, and we should be supporting all of them as much as we can. So do I like propose an alternate resolution, or how does this work?
You do, and then you need to get a second, and then we have discussion.
A second.
Can you tell us the amount I'm sorry, if I missed it,
Oh, 200,000.
Okay. Okay. It's been moved by Mr. Wynn, second by Ms. Stegman. Is there discussion on making this adjustment? Okay. Ms. Ryan?
Originally, I had heard that the amount they were requesting was going to be 150,000. So, or that's what had been talked about, and now it's at 200. I just want to confirm with Lauren and Nate that that number is still not a problem with our funds.
No, that's not a problem. We were thinking it was 150 as well, but 200,000 would just mean that that's what we would probably come back to request through the Affordable Housing Development Reserve in the fall.
Okay, because I guess if somebody could speak to why the number went up 50,000 since our earlier discussions, that would be great.
I'm sorry, just a point of clarification. I mean, on their application that they requested 350,000.
Correct. But I know that as the discussions have been swirling around this week, 150,000 was the number that was being circulated, and now it's changed.
Okay,
and
and y'all can wait to be called on. That would be helpful. Thank you. Mr. Wynn, do you want to answer that question while you changed your mind?
So I think it was 150,000, and my understanding was there was, well, I guess I had misread the note. I thought there was less money available in the fall for the town to come back and ask, and learning that there is no anticipated applications in the fall, and that pause, was it 500,000, Ms. Clark?
Yes.
In the fall?
Yeah, for the next round for the affordable housing
It'll
development.
be the full $688,000 will be available in the fall.
Okay, so even higher than I originally anticipated. So I'm proposing 200,000 now.
Okay.
Like Mr. Buensi just said, their empowerment's original request was 350,000.
Okay. So the motion is for 200. It's been seconded. Are there more questions or comments on this motion? All right. We'll vote on this motion. We still have to vote on the entire package, but we'll vote on this motion. Roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boyncey.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu. Didn't hear you.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. Thank you. Is there more discussion about the overall allocation proposal now that it's been adjusted with this new amendment? Do you have more comments, or does someone want to make a motion to pass the proposed adjusted?
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Nguyen. Okay, any discussion? Okay, again, roll call vote. Councilmember Parker, Mayor Pro Tem Parker, Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Boyncey,
Aye.
Councilmember Gu,
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen,
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan,
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman,
Aye.
and Mayor says aye as well. Thank you all. Good work, and thank you for our community partners who work with us on all this, and thank you to our HAB as well for working through all the application process. And we look forward to having lots of more affordable housing units and getting started on all of them. So appreciate it very much. Good job. All right, thank you. That brings us to item number 6, which is the North-South Bus Rapid Transit update.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brian Litchfield, your Transit Director, and working on pulling up our presentation here. Okay. Yeah. Well, good evening. With me this evening, I have Matt Cecil, who is our project manager for the BRT project. Also have some folks from our consultant team who will be available to answer questions if you have some. That is Kevin Bowman, who is our traffic engineer from AECOM, Julia Suprock, and Dan Myers from AECOM are with us as well. So the purpose for our presentation this evening is to share the Chapel Hill Transit staff and funding partners recommendation for an updated LPA for the North-South BRT project. We presented the updated LPA and a significant amount of information on the traffic analysis at your May 13th work session. So tonight we'll provide a brief background on the project. We'll cover a summary of the traffic engineering and then present the recommended LPA and the next steps for the project. So just as a general reminder for you, this project started in 2011 with the alternatives analysis. The original LPA for the project was endorsed by the Chapel Hill Town Council in April of 2016. FTA approved us to move into the project development phase in 2016, and council adopted an updated locally preferred alternative in 2019, January of 2019. When that was reviewed by FTA, at that time they asked for further clarification on the LPA and asked us to define what we were going to do specifically related to the convert versus construct option in the northern section of the corridor. In February of 2020, the FTA small starts rating was released for our project, and our project received a favorable rating and is able to stay in the project development phase if we have an updated and final locally preferred alternative or LPA. As a reminder, the context and vision for this project as it prepares the town and our funding partners to meet mobility demand as our region continues to grow. Our current system, well, at least pre-COVID, was close to maximum capacity, and we're looking forward to getting back to that level of service when it is safe to do so. The proposed system is a long-term and scalable solution. So it's once the BRT system is implemented, not only can we add service within the corridor, but it can also be expanded into other areas throughout Chapel Hill and Carborough. And it's much easier to expand that than it is other types of transit projects. It supports current and planned developments within the corridor. And most importantly, as we've talked about this project with you in the community several times, this is truly a multimodal project. While it's a BRT, the focus is also on implementing a multi-use paths to improve pedestrian and cyclist activity and connections within the corridor. So if the project is implemented as planned, almost 85% of the corridor will have a multi-use path or dedicated bike lane within the corridor, which is a substantial investment and improvement over what's there today. It also connects with regional transit options coming from provided by Go Triangle, coming out of Raleigh, Durham, and places like that. Also services provided by PART coming out of Alamance in areas to that direction as well too. So regional context, again, within Chapel Hill and Carborough, the north-south BRT corridor is on our screens on the left-hand side. It shows the existing corridor there. There's also a proposed corridor that we'd like to study that extends along 15501 from the East Town area through downtown and out to Carborough as far as White Cross. Again, part of that corridor is currently being studied today by an MPO project. So that could easily be extended at some point in time. But the idea is that our project could be extended both north and south and also east and west. Regionally, there's several efforts underway to look at BRT in other places. The regional transit folks have got a study that's going on that's looking at BRT not only in Durham, but also throughout the triangle. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner. Our friends in Raleigh also have 5 BRT corridors that they're advancing. They have one that they've already finished 30% design on, which started a couple years after we did. They've got another corridor that they will be submitting for the small start rating process that is coming up here again. So they potentially could have 2 projects in the small starts process as they continue to move forward. So the locally preferred alternative, or LPA, again, is a general description of the type of transit that will be used. It describes the running way, so the curb, whether it's curb running, median running, or dedicated lane. It also identifies the alignment, so the beginning and end of the route. As a reminder, the LPA is general. Design specifics and definition of additional elements such as specific station locations and other things like that are decided during subsequent engineering and planning efforts. The LPA is a critical step in the pursuit of federal funding. It tells the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, which alternative our system expects to be the most competitive in achieving local, regional, and federal funding. And again, FTA has told us we like your project. It scored well in the funding process, but in order for it to move ahead, we need a finalized LPA to continue to move forward. It's also good to know that the LPA can be adjusted as we move through environmental and design phases. So for example, if we decide a certain area should be a dedicated lane, like through downtown, for example, and as we move through the environmental and further engineering and design, we decide that that's not feasible, or that there are other more feasible options, we can adjust that through that process. So we've got ways as we continue to move through the federal process to make those adjustments if needed. So traffic engineering, this is a brief summary. We provided very detailed information on the traffic summary to you at the May 13th work session. But we evaluated the construct versus convert option, looking at 2018, 2024, and 2030 traffic data. It included growth to capture known future developments, and that was coordinated with town and NCDOT staff. Through downtown, it evaluated the convert versus the mixed traffic options to minimize impacts. The findings of that identified and were consistent with what NCDOT is looking for and recommending, is that we maintain 2 travel lanes in each direction on the northern and the southern ends of the corridor. And that buses, regardless of the treatment through downtown, as a result of signal timing improvements, the bus travel times improve greatly over the current condition. So whether we go with the mixed traffic or the dedicated lanes through downtown, as long as the signal timings are there, we can achieve very similar savings for bus travel times. Also with the signal timing improvements, the travel time savings for transit customers is very similar to in the convert versus the mixed traffic through downtown. So for general purpose or vehicles or automobiles, there will be some longer delays and queues expected throughout downtown if converted, which adds about a minute of travel time on average. Again, that's a minute per trip. So if you think about the length of an average song, it's about a third of a song as you're moving through downtown that it would take to move through that area. And that actually would probably be reduced a little bit by the traffic signal improvements that we talked about earlier. The convert option is much more viable as the impacts are not excessive to other vehicles. And I think it makes sense to continue to move forward with that option. And also, as we discussed the travel patterns for the corridor, most of the trips within that corridor are local trips. A very, very small percentage of the trips are actually going from one end of the corridor to the other. So most folks are not going to experience that full 1 minute worth of travel time adjustment or impact. So the traffic summary also included, and our consultants talked with the Rosemary Deck project traffic consultants as well too. So both of those work together upon review by the BRT team, consultant team, the traffic analysis and others. Our study generally captured the new parking deck traffic in the BRT analysis. So we don't anticipate any negative impacts from traffic if that to the BRT project if that project continues to move forward. Both studies made similar recommendations to retime the Rosemary intersection to improve operations, and now with consideration of removing the entrance and exit off of Columbia Street, there be very little to no impact to the BRT project as it moves, if our project moves forward and the Rosemary parking deck moves forward. So the two could be compatible in that area. So the traffic summary, and depending on how your Zoom is set up, our pictures may be covering the right-hand side of the screen there that shows the corridor. But just kind of walk you through that quickly. And as a reminder to folks is when we talk about construct for this project, we're talking about generally constructing within the existing curbs. All right, so there's very few areas of this project where we're going to have to go outside of the existing curbs, even when we talk about construct. So we'll be able to construct by reducing existing travel lanes, reducing medians in some areas, and also using existing right-of-way. So there should be very little impact to that. And as we talked at our May session as well too, many of the intersections we're actually looking at decreasing the amount of distance that folks are traveling when this project is implemented versus what they're doing today as a result of improvements to the pedestrian infrastructure. So the red again on your right-hand side identifies areas where we'd construct. The green, which is especially through the hospital area, which would be mixed traffic, which has always been mixed traffic since the beginning of this project. The convert, there's a couple sections where we'd be converting. So using an existing travel lane to turn it into a dedicated lane. That would be north near Westminster and Perkins. We'd use one of the 3 existing lanes that are there today. And then there'd also be the convert option through downtown, which was part of the original LPA for this project as well too. Both NCDOT and town traffic engineering staff concur with the findings and the recommendations that our funding partners and we are presenting to you this evening. So the 2020 LPA recommendation on the screen there, the yellow highlight just indicates the sections that are different from the original LPA. So if it's not highlighted, those sections have been consistent with the LPA since 2016. As I mentioned, it was it was originally adopted in 2016. It was reaffirmed in 2019, and we're asking you tonight to confirm the recommendation to convert a dedicated curb lane between Weaver Road to Westminster, from Westminster to Umstead and Hillsborough Street to construct a dedicated curb lane, and then from Umstead to Hillsborough Street, Umstead Road and Hillsborough Street to North Street to convert a dedicated curb lane. The rest of the LPA continues to be consistent with what was originally adopted in 2016 and reaffirmed in 2019. So next steps, where we're at with the project. Again, as a reminder, we are in the federal process. We're still in the very first phase. We're in the project development phase. So in order for us to consider moving forward into engineering and getting into more of the design work and those sort of things, we need to have an updated LPA and ask for approval from the Federal Transit Administration to move forward. So as you can see, we still have several steps to take in the federal process to move forward. If we were to complete the LPA and complete engineering, for example, we'd be in a position where we'd have what you'd probably refer to as a shovel-ready project, which would make us eligible for not only FTA funding through the traditional process, but if funding were to come available through future federal allocations for stimulus packages or things like that, we could be eligible for those sort of funding as well too. But we're still a significant step away from being in a position to compete for that. So next steps for us is if the LPA is approved, we would finish our environmental review, or NEPA as it's called. We'd finish the 30% design. And with those two things, we'd also evaluate and resubmit our project for a rating in August or September to see if we can improve our rating. Again, the rating that we received is adequate to move forward in the federal funding process. But as you can imagine, with most competitive processes, the better your rating is, the better chance you are at receiving funding when it becomes available. So the more competitive we can be, not only in that process, but also, quite frankly, the more competitive we can be with our friends in Raleigh, the better off we're going to be in that process. So we're working to continue to evaluate that. Which is also important. The next conversation that you'll have about the land use maps and ordinances is a critical part, potentially critical part of our project as well too. So if those things move forward and are more transit supportive than what we have today, that could significantly improve our opportunities in that scoring process. So the staff recommendation, which is consistent with our funding partner recommendation and also with the technical and policy committee committees for this project, is for council to adopt a resolution revising the locally preferred alternative for the north-south corridor study and submit the revised LPA to the Durham-Chapel Hill-Carrboro Metropolitan Planning Organization, who needs to adopt, if council adopts a new LPA, the MPO needs to adopt the LPA and include that in their long-range transportation plan in order for us to be considered eligible in the federal process. So again, the LPA, the areas that are shown here for you, the recommendation. The areas that aren't highlighted have stayed the same since 2016. The three sections that are highlighted indicate the results of the most recent traffic analysis and the recommendation by the funding partners and the technical and policy committees for the project. So with that, we'll see if there are any questions that you may have at this point.
Thank you, Brian. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Brian, for that presentation. Could you remind me what the original designations were for the ones that have changed?
So most of those were construct options. So we were looking at construct for the Weaver Dairy side of things, and then construct for the Homestead Hillsborough Road. So where we've so those two that have convert were construct at one point in time. The Westminster to Umstead was that section where we had either as convert or construct, and that we needed the traffic analysis to make that determination. So once that was done, determined that it would be that construct would be viable with the DOT.
That's great, thank you. Well, yeah, so my question is, and I think you've kind of answered this, but I need some help in envisioning kind of what this looks like. That one of the things I think, particularly with our future land use map and kind of what we're hoping for, well, I guess what I'm thinking of is MLK and kind of the area north of downtown, but it really could be both sides. You know, having this boulevard feel, doing that urban design and planning, having it feel like a place where the traffic is slowed down a little bit, that those crosswalks aren't massive. So you feel like you're playing Frogger through the intersection. So could you talk about what this does to that kind of vision of what MLK becomes if we're converting in parts, and just kind of how this fits in with what we're trying to do in terms of that area?
Sure. And that's thank you for that question. And again, I think part of our interest with this project is to not only improve, not only to improve the transit experience, but also improve the bicycle and pedestrian experience, and create a transit system that can support the development that is kind of been envisioned for this corridor. As you think about the work that was presented, I think it was last Friday at the kind of the work on the North Chapel Hill project or study that's underway. Again, the idea is that our transit, this transit project would be able to support projects like that and others within the corridor, and that our stations would be designed as such to integrate with those developments and improve that experience. Understanding that even as this project moves forward and begins to implement, it's not going to be a complete makeover from day one. We're working on, I think as council knows, we're working on a canvas that we don't own, and the original artwork was done by an artist who we may not share the same vision that artist had, right? So it's going to take us a little bit of time to do that, but the idea is that we're setting the kind of the base work to do that, and as we move into the design, the engineering and design, that's where not only our consultants that have that experience, but also Brian Peterson from the town will be instrumental in helping design and make that into something that works and looks really good and is consistent with the vision that council has expressed for that area. I think the other thing that we're very much interested in, whether we're looking at the convert or the construct option, and I'm trying to show this slide here for you, is finding ways, as you mentioned, Councilmember Anderson, to where possible, decrease the crosswalks and decrease where possible the lane widths and other things like that. So there's two pieces to that. One, if we can decrease the crosswalk length, the less of a challenge it is for folks that are biking, walking, and moving throughout that corridor in something other than an automobile, which many of us do today, but many more will do so in the future if there's an environment that's conducive to that. The other piece to that is also narrowing the lane widths for automobiles and working with DOT to also slow down the traffic speed. So much of this, and there's several parts of this corridor that are, posted as 45 miles an hour today, and folks travel much faster than that, even in the sections that are 35. I would imagine that the average speed is probably much higher than that as well too. So by moving down those lane widths and then also working with DOT to hopefully reduce the posted speed limit, I think we'll be able to start to accomplish some of those things that you were talking about. And just one quick example here, again, shows the intersection at Weaver Dairy Road. If on the left-hand side shows the distances for those the crosswalks today. The right-hand side shows what would happen under the BRT scenario. So as you can see, you know, on where my cursor is at today, the current width is 163 foot. It'd be reduced to 127 with BRT. It'd be 134 on the other side, 123 with BRT. The bottom section here, as it currently at 137, it'd be reduced by 20 feet to 117. And the top section would be reduced by 7 feet. Now, again, some of those are substantial, some are not as substantial, but again, any foot or 10 feet that we can save that keeps somebody from walking that distance, the better the experience is going to be for them. So does that help? Or?
No, it's very helpful. Thank you. Because this is not my area. So it helps to just walk through kind of how that changes. And will we lose I feel like I heard you say that this would mean in places losing the median. Is that true?
So not in all places, no. So we heard there was an interest from council to where possible to save some of the to save medians and provide some of that green space, you know,
yeah.
between the travel lanes where possible. So we there will be some places where we reduce the medians, but where we can, we're going to try and save some of the green space. And in those places, that's where you would probably see, or most likely see, us perhaps either bumping out of the curb to curb or the right of way a little bit. But most of that is to preserve some of that median space and some of that green space that's there. So it's just not a sea of concrete.
That's huge. I think that's so huge for the walking, biking, and driving experience, and for making people kind of want to stop and not just like get through. And I will admit to being one of those people that constantly has to watch my speed because the lanes are so wide. It's like telling me to go faster, and then I look at the speed limit and it's not as fast as I think. But anyway, thank you for this. And I guess I editorialized on the green space and the median, but that was a comment. But anyway, thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. And hopefully Chief Blue has left the conversation by now.
All right, Ms. Ryan.
Hey, I want to thank you for coordinating with the Rosemary Deck people on the traffic there to make sure that we're not acting at cross purposes with our different town projects. So I think that's great. I love your crosswalk diagram. I know we've all planted signs out there and you take your life in your hands trying to run across those crosswalks. So anything that you did there was terrific. And I was wondering if we could, as the project proceeds into the design phase, like Jess, I'm concerned about losing too much median. It's such an important part of the character in certain parts of this corridor. If we could, as the design proceeds, have some clear diagrams about where that's changing, so we'll have a chance to really understand it.
Sure, and I think we can, my my designers and engineers, since they're not visible there, I'm not seeing them there nodding their heads, but I think we can share that information now or soon. So okay. I think we can do that even before we move into the next phase of the engineering. But I'm looking to see, I see head nods now. So we can provide that sooner rather than later for you.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Any other clarifying questions before we hear from members of the public? Ms. Gu?
In that diagram, when you show the width of the crosswalk, did you count, how are you counted that you excluded the width for the BRT lanes and the multi-use lanes? Or how is that accounting from only the area that with the car traffic?
No, ma'am. So this is the fully designed on the right-hand side. So again, we're able to do that by the current lanes that are out there today are 12 plus feet wide, and then some. So we were able to reduce the lane widths, and then also able to, as you notice with the crosswalks, and I think you can still see the slide here. also able to reorient the slides. So this, or reorient the crosswalks. So this will require some work over here. But as you can see, these crosswalks here, they run at this kind of these odd angles. So if you're able to decrease the lane widths and then create a straight shot across here, instead of running this longer width here, you're still able to maintain the ADA accessibility and make those crosswalks much shorter for folks as well too. So we're able to do all of that with the BRT project. So the one on the right-hand side shows the travel lanes and the BRT lanes as well too. The yellow, which is outside the curb, shows where the multi-use path will be. So that'll be where the 10-foot plus wide multi-use path will be, which will be in this section replacing a pretty small sidewalk, but through the rest of the corridor, especially in the Carolina, well, ST's Carolina North section is going to be placing a multi-use path where there is nothing except dirt today.
So let's say this 127, that width, the 127, does it include the width of the multi-use path, or it
No.
does?
It does not, because the multi-use path is outside of the curb to curb. So it's 127 feet from curb to curb. Today, it is 163 foot from where the curb starts here to where the curb goes there. So the multi-use path is outside of that, but it's not part of the crosswalk, as the sidewalk is not part of that distance today. So the multi-use path would be outside of that. So we'd take up the 6 feet of where the sidewalk is today, plus probably an additional 4 feet or a little bit more in most areas to do the path on both sides.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Anyone signed up?
We do not.
Okay.
And no hands raised on our participant list. Am I right, Amy? Just make sure I'm not shutting anybody out. But we have no.
Okay, so that brings it back to council comments. We do need to make a decision here this evening. Are there more comments, or does someone want to propose? Mr. Nguyen?
Well, I was going to propose a vote, but I can't see everyone, so I don't know if people have comments.
So if you take your mouse across the sideways, there's a line that comes up between the shared screen and the row of people, and you can move it so you can see all 8 of us.
Just unshare this. Brian can unshare his
Well,
screen.
he can also, but you can also do that so that you can see the shared screen and 8 people, or actually you can see 10 at once. So, but that's a great little trick. You just have to move your mouse along and you get a straight line between the shared screen and the participants. And instead of just getting 1 column, you can move it over to get 2 columns. So then you can see all of us. So yay. I know we're all learning. Miss Anderson, did you have a comment?
I already said the median. Thank you for kind of really trying to integrate our feedback and moving this through the process. And I would just say, I would just encourage that you continue to think about that kind of placemaking and making it a boulevard feel, making it feel like a place that people want to be. And I know you've already been doing that, but as we continue through the process, just really continuing to emphasize that urban design aspect so we can make it a place instead of just a highway, which is kind of what parts of it feel like right now. So thank you for all you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, and we'll continue. We've made Brian Peterson an official part of our town team on this side of things. So we'll continue.
Brian is not getting let up anywhere. He's he's going to be on every team soon, we hope.
Well, we're certainly taking advantage of his skills. Thank you.
Mr. Parker, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to thank the team. I've seen this evolve for years, and I am just so pleased with the work that Brian and the team have done. So I just want to thank everybody who's been involved and just urge that we approve the LPA tonight, because we are kind of getting behind Raleigh, and if that happens any worse than we already are, it will not be a good outcome. So I hope my colleagues will support this tonight.
I want to say thank you too. The same thing about the medians and the feel and working with Mr. Peterson, but also want to throw in, we did approve the variable sign messaging for along that boulevard a while back. Want to make sure that sign placement doesn't conflict I don't know where they were supposed to be along that corridor. So if we could have someone double check to make sure it's not been placed in a place where we're going to have a transit stop, or maybe that's where we do want it. I don't know, but also not in the multimodal pathway, that kind of thing. So if you can just check on those, that doesn't have to go before we move this along, but just to make sure that we're aware of that going on. So is there a motion from council? Mr. Parker, you're muted, so I can't hear you.
I move approval of the LPA.
Second.
The move by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Stegman. Any more comments other than good job? All right, roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker?
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson?
Aye.
Councilmember Boyncey?
Aye.
Councilmember Gu?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan?
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman?
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. And sorry we had to move you, and appreciate your patience, and get that application in and let us know how it goes. Thank you very much.
We appreciate the vote, and we appreciate your all's leadership on this important project. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to item number 7, an update on land use management ordinance and town code amendments related to North Carolina General Statutes Chapter, I guess 160D. It looks like 160. Miss Tuffy Rogers.
Hi, this is
Corey.
Corey Lyles. Sorry.
Hello, Corey.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Corey Lyles with the Planning Department. I think I'm sharing my screen.
Thank you.
And tonight we will be discussing and kind of orienting council to some aspects of a state law that was passed in 2019, which is going to warrant some updates to town regulations and procedures. So we're kind of treating this as the initiation of a project as a vehicle for council to make necessary updates. And tonight we'd like to introduce you to what we call 160D with more detailed information on it to come in the months ahead. So our agenda is to share a little bit about what the law is, some of its impacts, and then the process and public engagement we could use for evaluating updates. And joining me in a moment will be Elisa Duffy Rogers, I should mention, our LUMO project manager. So in 2019, the General Assembly took up legislation that they have intended using to consolidate and modernize the enabling statutes for local land use regulation. So the state government has laws in place which then dictate kind of the realm of things that local jurisdictions can do. So what they did was create something called Chapter 160D, which is a new section of the North Carolina General Statutes that will now, in the near future, will contain the rules for local land use authority. And they did this by passing what's called Session Law 2019-111. So we have been informally referring to this all as 160D based on the name of the chapter. There are in fact 2 parts to the session law. Part 1 is already in effect, and it is not the case that we need to amend the town code to comply. It's simpler in its implementation, but we just need to understand how some development review procedures are going to be modified to comply with Part 1. And Elisa will be talking about that. And then Part 2 of session law is what establishes Chapter 160D, and it goes into effect next summer. And this is where our land use management ordinance and other town code regulations must be brought into alignment with Chapter 160D. The state has given some time, recognizing it takes some time to do this as a public process, but we do feel it'll be helpful to start that soon. So we, in response to the state mandated need for updates, we are defining a purpose for this project, which you see here, bringing town regulations and procedures into compliance with state law. So where we're talking about text amendments, it's just with this purpose in mind. Other things like rewriting our LUMO and other improvements would be through separate considerations. And our interest tonight is to start sharing some of the high level information about how our regulations and procedures need to change. And then we welcome any initial feedback you have. So now to talk more about part 1 of Session Law 2019-111, I will turn things over to Elisa.
Good evening. As Corey said, I am Elisa Duffy Rogers, the LUMO project manager, and I would like to take the next few minutes to review part 1 of Session Law 219, which went into effect on July 11th, 2019. And while this portion of the law does not require amendments to the LUMO, the town does need to consider both internal and external facing development review procedures to ensure compliance with this portion of the law. Part 1 makes 2 noteworthy changes in regards to special use permits. First, Part 1 says expressly that conditions and safeguards imposed under special use permits under this subsection of the law shall not include requirements for which the town does not have the authority under North Carolina law to regulate, nor requirements for which the courts have held to be unenforceable. The second change related to special use permits requires that any conditions placed on SUP must be consented to in writing by the applicant and the landowner in order to ensure that they are enforceable. So what that means to us is that whenever the special use permits are considered, it will require very close scrutiny to be looked at for each of these desired conditions to make sure that they're permitted by state statute and not precluded by the courts. This scrutiny is especially important given the new provisions regarding attorney's fees, which I will cover later in this presentation. Part 1 also makes changes in regards to legislative decisions, which are those decisions that adopt, amend, or repeal an ordinance. Like special use permits, any conditions placed on a conditional zoning approval must be consented to in writing by the applicant and the landowner. If an applicant and a property owner agree in writing, conditional zoning conditions can go beyond the town's legally established zoning authority and may be placed on the approval as a result. Part 1 specifically mentions things such as impact fees, taxes, and design requirements as the examples of conditions that may be levied on conditional zoning. What really is noteworthy is that contrast between the conditions that can be placed on special use permits and those that can be placed on conditional zonings. So while the town is now expressly prohibited from placing conditions on special use permits that exceed the town's basic zoning authority, we can do that if the applicant and the landowner consent in writing when we're looking at conditional zoning. In terms of attorney's fees, the new law does state expressly that the court will award attorney's fees if the local government exceeds the statute or case law setting forth our unambiguous limits on authority. So what does that mean for us? In general, it means that when we're writing new ordinances or interpreting, adding conditions to special use permits, or just generally administering the LUMO, the town has to be mindful of whether or not the town has the express authority to regulate in those instances. Failing to recognize this limitation on the town's authority could result in the town being mandated to pay attorney's fees, which obviously could have detrimental fiscal impacts. Permit choice is a topic that is of importance in Part 1. And what that is permit choice allows an applicant to choose which regulations apply if regulations change after an application has been filed. Permit choice now includes any and all rules and recommendations that regulate development applications. And those could be stormwater rules, those could be the rules that are in our engineering design manual. The expanded permit choice does have some limitations, meaning that if an applicant pauses the application for 6 months or fails to respond to our comments within 6 months, when the application resumes, they are then required to see and to comply with those rules that are then in effect. If the court finds that the town has acted inconsistent with or in violation with any permit choice statutes, the court will require us to pay the attorney's fees to any aggrieved party. So since we have limited time this evening to discuss the very technical changes related to Part 1 of Session Law 2019-111, staff is hoping to schedule small group discussions with council prior to the fall. But if it's okay with you, prior to turning the presentation back over to Corey, I'll ask if there are any clarifying questions on Part 1.
Parker?
Yeah, I think this is, I'm not sure if this, I think this is a clarifying question or maybe just asking for your opinion. But given the changes made to SUPs and to conditional zoning regarding conditions, it would seem that this would be likely to drive applicants toward SUPs versus conditional zoning. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's going to depend on the application type. There are going to be those applicants who do not want to be constrained by the by the quasi-judicial process and are wanting to get approval and are willing to give you more than they are necessarily required to do. So they'll move toward the conditional zoning. Those who don't want to negotiate with the town may move toward a special use permit if their project would lend itself to do so.
Anyone else? Clarifying question? Ms. Stegman?
So as you know, we often during the course of this process negotiate around affordable housing. Could you talk about, so we have our inclusionary zoning, which is part of our policies, but other affordable housing is the result of negotiation. Could you talk about what impact this has on that?
Certainly. So certainly the town attorney may also want to weigh in here. But if you're negotiating and you want something beyond what would be permissible under state statute, then the conditional zoning would be the application of choice, because that would give you the opportunity to negotiate with that. And assuming that the applicant agrees in writing, then you could then negotiate in good faith.
Okay. All right. Is there more to the presentation?
Yes, ma'am. I'll turn it over to Corey. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so next I'm going to briefly outline some topics of Part 2 of the session law. And this is what creates Chapter 160D, and this is the area where we'll need to look at updates to the town code. Because we have until next summer, we won't get into as much detail as what Elisa just presented. But there's a long laundry list of provisions in Part 2, and our team, Lisa and I and the town attorney and code enforcement staff and others have been assessing the different elements of this law and identifying a list of topics that in our view are the most important for council consideration. And so you see those listed here, starting with conditional use district zoning. This is the formal name for the way that a local jurisdiction combines a special use permit with a rezoning through a dual approval. Under the new law, when it goes into effect, conditional use district zoning will no longer be allowed. So we feel that's important because it is a fairly common practice in Chapel Hill. There are also some changes to the special use permit process where special use permits continue to be a process that's used. There's some consideration around how the Planning Commission should be involved in the process, and the fact that the council's decision on a special use permit should be based solely on the information presented at the public hearing. When it comes to development agreements, this is actually an area where we see kind of an increased flexibility created in Chapter 160D. There's more options on what can be included in a development agreement, what types of projects they can be used for. So it may make it a more broadly possible tool to use. Appeal of historic district commission decisions. This is another area with more options, specifically that it's possible for a local jurisdiction to have appeals go directly to Superior Court on a HDC decision rather than using our Board of Adjustment. There's a number of minor changes, including updated definitions that we need to bring into alignment with state law, reorganization of codes, and modernization opportunities, for example, to send out certain notifications by email acknowledging that that's possible in this day and age. So these are kind of a host of things where we're not seeing much challenge in implementing them. Let's see, so perhaps the biggest area that does require change is that first one, conditional use district zoning. Since we no longer have this procedure available, we may need to revise LUMO and expand opportunities for something like conditional zoning, which is the legislative only process. And unfortunately, they've given them very similar names, but conditional zoning will still be allowed. Example of conditional zoning at work is the Weaver's Grove project, which is under consideration by council. We may want to reconsider what is considered a special use, given the changes in the ability to link special use permits with the rezoning. So in this is a prime example of where we see some possibility to explore policy choices in terms of how we update LUMO. And we plan to come back to council to have further discussion on that and make sure the public can be part of that discussion and offer comment. So with that in mind, I'm going to now outline our proposed process for working through these updates. We have a schedule here that works towards us making all the necessary changes by the spring of 2021, which puts us ahead of the effective date, July 1st of 2021 for Chapter 160D. This schedule would mean that we begin some public engagement over the summer. So we want to make sure have a chance for council to weigh in on whether you're comfortable with that. And this timeline is included on page 163 of your packet. But you see the steps here with several opportunities for public engagement and council discussion, and then moving through the typical steps of a text amendment process. The process we propose has ongoing opportunities for public engagement. And as we thought about engagement strategy, we decided to organize the public involvement into these 4 phases. The engagement we'd start doing this summer, that phase 1, building familiarity. It's really about educating and creating a baseline knowledge around things like special use permits and other types of development review where the public isn't as familiar with these terms. And so we want them to just understand some of these terms and concepts. And that way, as we move forward into the second and third phases, community members can offer more informed input. And those later phases would come later this year and in early 2021 as we move towards the opportunity for adoption. The phase 4 here is just thinking about ways to educate the development community about how our ordinances will change once the changes are adopted. And this information is also in your packet on page 164. So in closing, these are the next steps that we've identified. The opportunity to initiate public engagement around just some education on these concepts and what Chapter 160D is starting in July. Elisa mentioned some small group discussions as an opportunity to help council continue to engage around the Part 1 changes during the summer. We would come back in the fall to talk more about the Part 2 changes and where there are opportunities for policy choices, for example, with how we move out of conditional use district zoning. We would anticipate a work session or other forum that's open to the public for that Part 2 discussion. And again, our interest tonight is to just provide an introduction to the Chapter 160D provisions and to share our proposed project approach. At this point, we welcome any feedback or direction you have, as well as additional questions.
Ms. Ryan?
So let's see. First of all, kudos on a very pretty PowerPoint, whoever did that. It's nice to mix them up once in a while. So for part one, my understanding is that we don't have a lot of choice in those things, correct? Right, we're not going to be making policy decisions or LUMO change. These are just things that need to happen. And
yes, ma'am, that's correct. We have no choice about it, and it's been in effect since last year.
So then what's the purpose of the council small groups then?
We were concerned that given that this is a very technical conversation, that you might want a little more time to have that conversation than what's available to us this evening. Certainly if y'all are comfortable with it and we don't need to have any more conversations, we certainly don't need to do that, but we wanted to offer it to you in case you wanted to have some time to also, and truthful, also just start building a little bit of familiarity with you with all of these very legalistic technical zoning terms.
Okay, and I don't know how everybody else feels, but again, if it's something that we have no choice in, I think I certainly would appreciate some information about this is what will be changing for you, but I don't know that I need to discuss it because it's not, I don't have any choice in the matter. So that's just my 2 cents on that. And Corey, in part 2, were you saying that the Planning Commission may no longer be reviewing special use permits?
They may review special use permits. That's a law expressly allows that, but it also specifies that the council or the decision maker on a quasi judicial procedure. So in the case of special use permit, the council's decision needs to be based strictly on information presented at the public hearing. And at least I don't know if there's any more detail to elaborate on there, but you will have a chance to kind of evaluate hopefully in the fall, just what makes sense for the ongoing role of the Planning Commission.
Okay, so I mean, could there, and I know you don't have all the answers now, but could there be a scenario where the Planning Commission reviews it and then they come to the public hearing and give input, or will they not have standing, or?
Essentially what the law says is that the Planning Commission certainly can hold a forum, but their recommendation cannot in any way sway the ultimate decision maker. So if they want to come and present at the public hearing, that's their prerogative, but their recommendation cannot be factored into your ultimate decision. So obviously that has huge policy implications for the town.
Wow, okay, thank you.
Mr. Boynton, then Ms. Gu.
Yeah, that was just the question I was going to ask. I appreciate that clarification. I was also going to say that, regarding the public input, I've been in a classroom with law students talking about concepts of planning and land use law, and I've seen many eyes glaze over because of the complexity. I'm wondering for the public input that you'll be doing with this, have all the confidence in the world in our planning staff to communicate this and to inform the public in an adequate way. I'm also wondering if I'm sure you've worked with folks over at the school government, if you plan to bring any of them into these presentations to help the public understand these concepts and what we're being required to do.
The School of Government has been a big resource for us, just in terms of our understanding. They've put out some YouTube videos and blog posts, and very helpful for us. And we do plan to look at that to see what we could just share out with the public that they're creating. I think they're in terms of like if they could attend a meeting or be more directly involved. I know they're in pretty high demand as all jurisdictions statewide look at these updates, but we do have good relationships with them. So we can definitely look into that opportunity.
Thanks.
Ms. Gu? You're muted, yeah.
Okay, so when you mentioned that for the planning commission, for the special use permit, does that also apply to other development review boards like environmental board or connectivity transportation board? Is that the same that they can organize review sessions, but their recommendations has no bearing on the council's decision? I just want to understand.
Essentially, yes. So what the law specifically says is they certainly could hold those meetings, but the council has to make their decision based without their recommendation. So whether that's the planning commission or it's HAB or it's ESAB or whatever else, once you enter that quasi-judicial situation, the recommendations cannot sway the ultimate decision maker. So as Corey said, this will be some policy conversations that we need to have in the fall about how we ultimately want to handle development review.
Okay, well, I guess I just have a lot of questions. So I actually appreciate you offering those small group sessions, because I when I read the material that has been sent to us today, and even after today's presentation, I still have a lot of questions for this. So both for the process as well as the policy implications or the initiatives and the goals that our town want to accomplish. What's the implications for this change to all those policy goals they want to accomplish? So I think, well, at least for me, I'm just speaking from my perspective, I do need those small group sessions to ask questions and to fully understand what are the changes and what their implications are.
Mr. Parker?
So I just want to make sure I understood something. So what you folks said was that the combination of an SUP and a rezoning is the way we often do projects. Probably most projects, at least historically, have been done that way. You said, if I understood you correctly, will no longer be permitted. Does that mean it won't be permitted as a bundled process, or that it won't be permitted at all? And sign me up for a small group session.
I'll say it won't be permitted. A special use permit is still a possible process, and a rezoning is still a possible process. But the practice of linking the two, where the special use permit becomes conditioned as the only way the property can be developed, will no longer be an option under state law.
So you basically have to do a general rezoning and then a separate SUP, but the rezoning presumably would have to happen first, and it would be a general rezoning rather than when we do like an like an R5-C.
We will not have the -C anymore.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. And I know one implication of that is that if the site were then, that development of the special use permit didn't happen, and then there was someone else who wanted to do a by right development, that would still be a possibility, which, Elisa, correct me if I'm wrong, is not true when you have the -C conditional use district.
Yeah, that's right.
Correct. So
Okay.
I would say that the ability to condition a project will still be there under the conditional zoning tool, which will still be in place. And that will be, O&I 3-CZ. So that will still be an option for us in terms of placing conditions on development.
Okay. Those are some big changes.
They're huge. All right, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item?
No one has signed up, and we do not have any raised hands.
Okay. So I'm hearing from council that they would like some small group discussions to understand more. And then maybe those videos and tools from the School of Government could be made available for people to take a look at, maybe during the summer, to share out with council members and the public. And I do think that's something that our planning commission needs to take a look at as well, to understand, and some of the other boards you'll know better about, our development review boards. But I think we all need to understand what this is before we can give you any feedback. We have to understand how it, what it is, and then understand how it would work in our framework. So, are there other comments? I think this is, I was just going to ask, if the state legislature was to turn over this year, is there a likelihood that that section could be rescinded or changed or come back around? And I don't know that you have those answers, but Alan, you might know better. Is there an opportunity to reverse some of this stuff?
I mean, I'll just say, when you get a different makeup, depending on the numbers you can get, the possibilities are endless.
Okay. So very interesting. Okay. Thank you for that legal. Yeah. So if you could, do you need more input from us, other than we'd like to have some smaller discussions to understand what it is before we move along with what we do about it?
I think that works for us. Elisa, does that sound good?
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Always exciting changes coming our way. Never dull moment. All right. So that brings us to item number 8, which is to continue a public hearing for the Rosemary Redevelopment Economic Development Agreement to June 24th, 2020. This is just looking for a motion to continue, since we're not ready to bring this item forward.
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Ms. Parker, but Mr. Parker, but I wanted to see if there's anybody from the public who wanted to speak on this item. Okay, just making sure. Any other comments? Okay, I will call for a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boincy.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. That's been continued. Item number 9 has been pulled, and item number 10 has been pulled. So that means we are at the end of this meeting. I remind you that you have we need a motion to go into closed session. I think Mr. Parker.
I'm sorry, just to clarify that the 125 public hearing is going to continue to the 24th, correct?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we need to vote on that?
Just make that clear.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Has not been pulled. The item number 9, the conditional zoning at 125 East Rosemary, has been moved to
The 24th, June.
June 24th. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That wasn't on my sheet, so I'm sorry. All right. Okay. Mr. Parker.
I move that the council go into closed session as authorized by General Statute 143-318.11A3 to consult with the town's attorneys regarding a lawsuit in which the parties are Epcon Homestead LLC and the town of Chapel Hill, and as authorized by General Statute 143-318.11A4 to consider an economic development matter. At the conclusion of this closed session, the council will adopt a single motion to end the closed session and adjourn the meeting without taking further action.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Anderson, to go into closed session for the reasons stated. I'll need a roll call vote again, please. Any comments before? Oh, okay. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boincy.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu. Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. We are now moving to closed session. This normal special regular meeting is now adjourned. And if you guys will log out of this one and go log into your other meeting, I will meet you there at the conclusion at last man standing. Thank you. Am I good to go, Amy, or?
Yes.